That's why you see deer or bear getting drunk, because have you heard of that? Where there's like, oh, I saw a drunk deer, a bear.
Really?
Yeah, other animals too, because they've eaten fruit on the ground that's fallen there, and it ferments.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Hello, my name is Ria Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world.
Hip, hip, hooray!
Bringing us into episode 473 of Cider Chat was myself, Ria Windcaller, and my friend KC. She was asking about a cider that I brought out to share and was curious about how it was made. And you're going to be hearing a little bit of this conversation. I thought it was perfect. She actually didn't know I was recording it at the time, which is kind of one of the things that happens with my friends and family. If I see something that is being discussed that I think is going to be kind of cool to share with you out there in Ciderville, I will record it. And with permission, then I do release it. So, yeah, it was a fun conversation. We were talking about that phenomena that happens when fruit has fallen to the forest floor, typically in the forest floor, because if it's in the orchard will be picking up fruit. They know it will attract bear, deer, definitely the yellow jackets, which is a certain kind of insect, like, a bee, and wasp. They all like that. They, especially in the fall, they want to have a little drink of sweetness. But for the bigger creatures and smaller creatures too, they'll go up and start eating that, and they can get essentially drunk on fermented fruit. And that was a little bit of the backdrop I was using for a baseline conversation on how one ferments and makes cider, which is what this episode is about. It is titled, How to Make a Pét Nat Cider. And when you have a Pét Nat, you're going to have tiny bubbles. And I just love those tiny little bubbles. And that's what we were drinking, KC and I, and that's what spurred her to ask me about making it. So I'm going to actually interject that conversation here shortly. You'll get to hear it because it's my go-to way of explaining what happens in that fermentation. And this episode was encouraged on a number of different levels. One is it's the fall, and I really like to release an episode this time of year on cider making. And with that in mind, I want you to know, if this is your first time making cider, or even if you've done it for a whole bunch of times and you might have some different problems, stuck fermentation, or maybe a little bit of eggy smell coming off of your fermentation, there are so many episodes at ciderchat.com in the archives where you could find tips, and there's show notes to each episode that will help you kind of trace the problem or help you work through what you're trying to make there. And for this episode, again, it's number 473, at the bottom of the page of the show notes, there is what is called Mentions in this Cider Chat. I do this for every single episode. And in this particular show notes, you're going to find cider making how-to episodes. I try to pick out some main ones that are baseline for beginner cider makers and then kind of taking it to another level. And so we could go all the way back probably to like season 2. I see episode 95. That's cider making at home, easy as 1, 2, 3. And then episode 152, which was in season 4, how to teach cider making 101. That's where I was talking about if you're doing a demonstration at a festival or something like that, how to make a sizer using sweet mead yeast. That's one of my favorite styles to make for folks who are really new to the game. There's another episode, 381, that was in season 8, and that's DIY cider making for beginners. Another episode on beginner tips for squeaky clean cider equipment. There was like a series here, beginner cider making tips for primary fermentation. And then the following episode called Managing Cider's Secondary Fermentation, DIY tips. So we're going to sort through primary and secondary because truthfully, when I was first in this game of fermentation and folks are throwing out those terms, they were really misleading to me. So we're going to sort through that and try to make it a little bit easier as we move along this episode. And I'll kind of pull back from my conversation with KC, give you an idea how I was explaining it there. It was kind of fun, short little conversation, and bring you up to snuff so that you could try your hand at making a Pét Nat. It's just a delightful way to make a cider. So that's one reason why we're having this episode right now in cider making. And also because of last week's episode, which was featuring James Forbes of Little Pomona, and also Deborah Fox of the Malvern Hills Trust. That was all recorded at the Totally Cider Tour to the UK that took place this last August. And we're having a cider dinner with Little Pomona Cider. And James was talking about what is called in the UK as the rule method. And I mentioned that it's much like Pét Nat. And I'm going to just kind of squeeze that out a little bit and talk about how it can differ and what they're looking at here in the or looking at there, not in the UK right now, in terms of the rule method. So that's what we're in store for, and I think you'll enjoy it, especially if you are curious about the language of cider making in general. I think the more you know about it, even if you never try your hand at it, it will allow you to appreciate, in either case, that finished product in your glass. And I certainly seek out Pét Nats. They are delightful, and for a whole lot of reasons. So before we get into that, we're first going to go for a wee bit of news from out and about in Ciderville. Coming up on November 1st is an Apple Harvest Festival. Evidently, it's the 25th year of this fest, and it's taking place at Vintage Virginia Apples. And that is also known as Albemarle Cider Works. They have two names there, right, because they have the nursery and the cidery. And it's co-hosted by Cove Garden, which is a club. And they're going to have a full-day event. And I see a very familiar name, David Timmerman, who has been working with Chuck Shelton there at the Cider Works. He's going to be doing a cider pressing demo. They have an apple pie contest. And then there's a cool season gardening fall into spring with Margaret Shelton of Shelton Herb Farm. I'm not sure if Margaret is related to the Shelton family, but I'm thinking she is. And then there's the cider pressing, making the perfect pie crust and the jam making. There's going to be music and food trucks. If you haven't had Albemarle Cider Works, you're missing out. I know they have an online store, so that's one way to get their product. But if you're in the region on November 1st, or even if you're not, well, this is a good idea to take a trip and head that way. I'll put a link in the show notes to the albemarleciderworks.com website, and you can look it up right there and get all the info. In the mailbox, I got a little postcard from the Czech Republic, but it's from an American who is traveling there, and that would be Ben Kunis. You might know him on Instagram as Strom Ascorus, and that is a word that is related to Sorbus domestica. I don't know how else to explain this. These are kind of like big, chunky words for me to wrap my mouth around. But in short, Ben is a big fan of Sorbus domestica. He posts a lot about it. And I think this is his second trip to that region of the world, this time to attend a festival. He wrote, "Hi, Ria. I hope you're doing well. I've been bouncing all over Europe, chasing after Sorbus domestica, from France to Croatia, I think, and of course, the Czech Republic. The Harvest Festival in Tavronzalata was a wild party, as expected. Not much cider, but lots of brandy, beer, and even Sorb wine, co-fermented with grapes. Have an amazing fall. Best regards, Ben." Well, I just love it because the card itself has this personal touch from Ben. It's from another country. That's always cool to get in the mail. And on the other side are these 3 photos, 2 beautiful Sorbus domestica trees. And if you don't know about this variety that's related to apples and palms, when you have a tree that is allowed to grow and it's unhindered by other trees around it, it really creates this magnificent canopy that looks much like a giant oak tree, kind of sprawling out, maybe like a giant maple tree. And then it also has 2 different photos diagonal from each other of the sorb, the fruit themselves. Now, I've had a number of episodes with who we call the French Pope, Arnold, also at Cider Chat. I'm just going to recommend that you put in the search bar at ciderchat.com, Sorbs, that's spelled Sorbs, and Domestica is its official Latin name. It's also well known in France and that whole region of the world as Gourmet. And of course, you have producers working with that product in the region where Ben was. They were making Sorb wine and the brandy. And we do see that in France. And the better known Gourmet that we know that you can probably get online too is from Eric Bordelais. He's been making it, I think, since 2017. And then there's also another maker, Marie, also in Normandy, in Lower Normandy, and she does a Gourmet too. And Arnold picks like all her fruit. And they're these tiny little pears, and they have this nickname called chocolate pears, which I absolutely love. They do not taste like a pear, though. They're really different. In fact, the one that I've had, and this was fruit from the Arnold Arboretum, which is outside of Boston. There is one Sorbus domestica tree there. It was actually from the Czech Republic, I think planted in 1947 or 48. My memory is correct. And I was there where I was able to find a couple of fruit on the ground, and it was really, really creamy inside. And kind of, would I say chocolate? No, but that doesn't mean there's not a variety that doesn't taste like that. So I'm super happy to hear from Ben. I just love hearing his travels. He was in the UK when I was there recently in August, and then he was meeting up with Arnold, who is such a host, and he is the French Pope of Sorbus Domestica for a reason, because the guy is so passionate. So do check out those episodes if you have an interest in this particular fruit. The one of the titles for the episode was Can Sorbs Save the World? And I kind of think they can in a way. There's a lot to be said about it. Check it out. Thanks, Ben, for sending that beautiful postcard. It was lovely to hear from you, and I want to catch up soon and hear more about your trails. In a moment, we're going to be going to our featured presentation on tiny bubbles and how to make a Pét Nat Cider. But before we go there, I just want to make mention that coming up in 2026, there will be not one, but two Totally Cider tours that will be international. The first one is heading to the UK again. The United Kingdom is calling. And this is going to be for the springtime in the UK. We're looking at either the last week of April or the first week of May, so we could kind of hit blossom time. I'm working out the details there. I do have a good wait list for that already because it was such a high demand tour this past August that I led. And I want to do it while the sun is still shining, right? We want to do this and keep it going. So coming up, that'll be in the spring. And then in the fall, we will be heading to France, to Paris, Normandy, and Brittany. There's a lot of episodes on France and now the UK to give you a good sense about what these tours are about. Besides this episode, we were kind of taking a break from that. Coming up next week, we'll be heading back to the UK as I finish up with some of the recordings that I had there. And this is an amazing way to experience the world of cider. I mean, if you are looking at getting, certificates or really having your palate be expressive of the range of ciders, you want to go on this tour because I'll tell you, you can't learn about cider out of a book. You got to go to the place where it's made to experience it. Really, that's it. And that will give you the essence of what's in that bottle. That's my own 2 cents on it. And plus, it is just so damn much fun. It's just too much fun. Yeah, it's epic. I'm just overwhelmed by it and the people on the tour. I could just go on all day about it. I'll save you for that for now. Just know if you want to go to the UK or France, please send an email to info@ciderchat.com. In the title, put Cider Tours. Let us know how many people on the tour. We'll get you on the wait list. It is a first come, first serve wait list. First release goes to Cider Chat patrons first. So if you really want to have an in, that's the place to go. And then it goes out to the wait list and then out to the general public. And if the past UK tour was any sign, that sold out within days. And I suspect this one will too. We'll be limiting the numbers for the UK tour again due to the roads and just the way I set it up. You got to have something in your pocket there. All right. Oh, boy. Okay, so much fun. So that's what's happening there. 2 international cider tours heading out to the UK and France for 2026. Who knows? What else might be coming up, too? All right, let's take a little pause here, and then we'll be back with our featured presentation, all on Tiny Bubbles.
Walking through the orchards.
It's time now for our featured presentation, all on Pétillant Naturel, or as is widely known as Pét Nat. Pétillant is a French adjective. It means sparkling or slightly fizzy. And a Pét Nat cider is going to have a gentle effervescent, a little less bubbly than champagne, but a bit more lively than a still. And it's au naturel, if you will, meaning that it's naturally sparkling or a natural fizzy cider. So I'm going to keep on referring to it as Pét Nat because Pétillant is kind of a mouthful. So that's where we'll go. And I really want to say that this episode here was encouraged from a couple emails that I got in here. So first one came from the UK. It is from Liam. And he writes, "Hi, Rhea. I loved last week's episode." That was with, again, James Forbes and Deborah Fox. Deborah from Malvern Hills Trust and James of Little Pomona. And had to write in because you mentioned the rule method. I've heard that term a lot from UK makers, but I've also seen bottles labeled Pét Nat coming from France and even the US. Are these the same thing, or is there a technical difference? I'd love a little clarity before I start bottling my next batch. Okay, Liam, you're in for a treat. And then also we heard from Sarah in Vermont, and she wrote, "Hey, Cider Chat, I've been hearing more people at our local cider club talking about doing a Pét Nat this fall. But when I searched it online, I found references to something called the rule method too. Is that just an old school version of Pét Nat, or does it mean it's wild fermented? Thanks for keeping these cider terms straight for the rest of us." All right, Sarah, hang on to your hat. And then we got from Mark and Jules, the Curious Cider Duo, and they wrote, "Hi, Rhea. We are small-scale cider makers experimenting with natural styles, and we love the part of last week's show where you mentioned both the rule method and Pét Nat. We always thought Pét Nat was a wine term, so does the rule method mean the same thing, just applied to cider, or is there a difference in how or when you bottle? Looking forward to a follow-up episode." All right, you guys, so we got it all here, and I know that, sometimes we kind of get things meshed in, so appreciate this opportunity to kind of fine-tune it and sort through the difference between Pét Nat and rule method. What I think is really interesting to know is that there is so much curiosity on how cider is made, and that is something that if you're in the cider industry, you want to put that in your pocket and save that thought, because your patrons, the folks visiting your sites or purchasing a bottle of your product, they want to know, they want to get a sense of what is in that glass, how it got there. And I think that's really exciting because it's, one, fun to make cider. So like Albemarle Cider Works doing that cider pressing, that demo, there's going to be a lot of talk about that at that one-day event on November 1st coming up. And for all the different makers and clubs, this is a great opportunity to kind of dig into it and find out the different levels that one can work with the fresh pressed apple juice and turn it into that really fine cider. So I was stoked to get these letters and this interest and this curiosity. And also going back to my friend Karen, I actually think I want to start there before we actually answer the question, Pét Nat versus rule method. And just have you hear a little bit of our conversation, because it really was part of also the catalyst for this here episode this week to enjoy authentic interest in the subject that those of us who are in the cider community and in the industry sometimes take for granted. And we could get so overwhelmed by the technicality of it all that the explanation could get way too unattainable for those who just want to know, like, what is up? So here's my short version. We might have had a couple ciders here, but yeah, let's check it out and enjoy this quick little recording. Me explaining the basics of fermentation. That'll give us the standing for then to talk about Pét Nat versus rule method. The basics of fermentation.
Yeah.
Which is for any fruit, really.
Right.
you get the juice, and of course fruit on the ground will ferment too, right?
Right.
The juice, the sugar's there, and it just picks up like yeast in the air, and what's around it on the leaves, and that starts eating the sugars, and then that starts fermenting.
You don't
That's
add
why
sugar or anything.
you don't. I mean, like deer. That's why you see deer or bear getting drunk, because have you heard of that? Where there's like, oh, I saw a drunk deer, a bear.
Really?
Yeah, other animals too, because they've eaten fruit on the ground that's fallen there, and it ferments.
Oh wow!
And
I've heard of animals eating medicinals and
yeah, no, it's a little like kind of the same in a different way. Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the basics of fermentation, no matter what. And with juice,
so you just bottled it. So you bought the juice and just bottled it.
I was at this homebrew club, called Live Free or Brew something. I'll have to look it up.
Or instead of Live Free and Die,
it's
Live Free or Brew.
yeah, brew free, something like that. Anyways, really nice group of people.
Brew
and they're
free and live.
Probably. And they make cider too, and a whole bunch of them are really geeked out in cider, and we're all sitting at this table drinking stuff.
Very
and
different.
I got the juice, and I said I'm going to just let it do a wild ferment, and I really want to catch up with them to let them taste some, because I think they'll enjoy it.
Where did you have it ferment?
Just here at home. You
Just
so you
in the
put it in a
bottom?
big glass container. You know, I had a big 5-gallon glass container, and I was able to. I'm going to move that away from the fire. I was able to, get the juice. I brought it back home, and then you put a little airlock on it. Airlock is like a little S tube.
Right.
Has a little bit of water.
Okay.
So only gas can escape. Nothing could go in. So you're keeping it pretty much airtight. Because as the yeast starts munching away on the sugar.
But you don't put the yeast in this. This is just natural yeast, right?
This is, my favorite word for it is wild yeast. That's like feels happy. But there's like ambient yeast, spontaneous, spontaneous fermentation is what's happening, because it just is in the air. Yeast is everywhere. Right?
So that's what I'm saying. Did you put any additives?
I didn't put any yeast, and this is a total wild ferment.
Yeah, the wild ferment.
Just, from the juice, picks up the yeast from the cider house there, and from that, the skin on the apple. And I brought it home, and I just stuck an airlock on it, and I just let it ferment. That's all I've done. And then I've racked it over. So, how apple cider juice is really like cloudy, right?
Yeah.
So when you're drinking this is clear now, right? Like you don't see any floaties. It's like kind of pale yellow, maybe a little green tint. And so what you want is all that heavy particles, all that precipitants to drop to the bottom. And the yeast, starts growing. When you make like bread?
Yeah.
And you have the yeast, you sprinkle the yeast on the warm water, and you see it kind of start bubbling and getting white and kind of creamy. That's what you want, because it's kind of multiplying. And so you take, that wild yeast happens in solution, that's like making drinks in jail. I think they kind of like use fruit and stuff, But anyways, that's what it's about. And so you have the multiplying yeast, and it eats it up, and then as it's eating it, it does start dying off, and that's where everything starts clarifying, and you get this little schmutz on the bottom. It's called the lees, and it's really like dead yeast cells. And so as you're making it, you start in October or so, it gets really bubbly and fermenty, and you see it foaming because it's eating the sugar. The yeast is like jazzing.
And you leave it?
You let it. The air is kicking out. It's producing CO2, and it goes out the airlock, kicks it out. And the precipitants drop to the bottom, and you say, okay, well, now it's starting to get clear, because but you want to get that schmutz off the bottom, because it could kind of like affect the juice. And so you rack it over into a new vessel and clarify it, and let the process happen again until it gets kind of clear.
Right.
And you can measure how much alcohol's in it, and then I like to bottle it just early enough.
How can you measure how much alcohol is
with a hydrometer. With a hydrometer, it's specific gravity. It shows you how much alcohol is in the solution. The water.
You stick like a thermometer in there?
Yeah, it's a thermometer. It's really easy.
Oh my God!
And then you.
Too bad you can't do that with marijuana.
We probably could.
Well, that's.
You check that, and then you bottle it, and that's it. And I waited for like 2 or 3 years, forgot about it, and now here we are. Cheers.
Cheers. You must have given me
You need a little bit more.
You were afraid that I was going to get too schmutzed.
Here you go. Cheers.
Cheers.
Curiosity is always piqued whenever one serves something that is homemade and delicious. And in this case, it was a bottle of my cider that really ignited this conversation. Though it was a very rudimentary explanation, it was enough to give you a sense of the process, right? You just have juice, everything can ferment, and whatever fruit you have, there is some type of sugar in it that will then be fermented. So let's get in from the juice to the cider and just understanding fermentation, because I know some of you out there in Ciderville are looking at cider making right now. So let's go through a little bit of that. I was talking about the yeast converting the sugar to alcohol, and it creates the CO2, creating that vigorous bubbling, and it typically lasts around 7 to 14 days. This is what is called primary fermentation. I'm going to just call it active fermentation. And then after that, like 14 days or so, you start getting a little bit of a slower phase. The fermentation slows down, the cider clarifies, those precipitants start dropping, the yeast settles down to the bottom, and that could last from 2 to 4 weeks or more. So that drop is primary to secondary. That's secondary fermentation. If that has messed you up in the past, join the club. It has also messed me up too. But essentially that's what's taking place. You're going from primary, which is a very vigorous fermentation, then to secondary. And it's one continuous process, and the yeast never stop working. It just slows down in the cider. As it's slowing down, some of those yeast cells are also dying, and that's what produces the lees, which you'll see on the base of your vessel. It looks like what I call schmutz. It's like a kind of a pale color to it. And it's a little bit of a slurry on the bottom of your vessel. And you really kind of want to get that off there if it's going to just be sitting there and you're not planning on doing a technique called bâtonnage, which means stirring in the lees. So therefore, you're going to have to take that cider that you have fermenting away now and transfer it off the lees into another vessel, and that's called racking. And that typically takes place, if you're doing a standard cider, about a month or so after that active fermentation, that primary fermentation, once the bubbles start slowing down in your airlock. And you're looking for that. You really have to monitor that and just get a good sense of it over time. But by and large, if I make cider in October and I know the holidays are coming up, I'm lucky if I rack it over in December. And the cider that we were drinking that evening with KC was a Pét Nat, and it was total wild yeast. I didn't add any cultured yeast, so it goes even slower when it is a wild yeast. If you use a cultured yeast, about 2 or 4 weeks after that first initial active fermentation, the primary fermentation there, you're going to see it totally slow down. It's just a robust action, slows down, and a lot of that precipitants drops to the bottom. You want to rack it over. For my wild yeast, not so much. So I'm not looking at racking that until January, which frankly, as just a schedule thing, is pretty good because November and December gets really busy where I am for all the reasons around holidays and family and all that. So January, not so bad once you get past that new year. And then in that process, I'm going to be racking it a few more times because more and more yeast will start dropping to the bottom. I don't want to rack it off so much so that the cider goes completely dry, which happens when the yeast eats up every last piece of sugar in that solution. Then the end result will be a still cider, so there'll be no sparkle to it. And we have a number of very nice still ciders on the market. I've made still ciders myself, but my choice is to have a little bit of sparkle. I love a Pét Nat, that effervescent, to give it just a little bit of a bounce in its step. I like that sparkle. So what I do then is, let's say I did my first racking in January, then I monitor it between then and May, And probably every 2 months, I'll see how much lees are on the bottom of my carboy, the vessel. And if it seems like there's a little bit, and I'm watching the airlock on the top, and I'm looking for counter pressure in the airlock. And what I mean by that is you have water in the airlock that stops oxygen from going into the vessel, the carboy. The carboy is a glass vessel that you make or you use as a home cider maker to condition your cider in and ferment it. The counter pressure happens because the CO2 is in your vessel and it's pushing out pressure. So you want to watch on your airlock, which is a little S tube, see that liquid, which is typically water, in that airlock is being pushed out just a little bit. Then I know that there's still activity in my carboy. There's still activity with the yeast eating the sugars. I don't want it to go so slow that my cider is now going to be a still cider. So I might do 1, 2, 3, maybe four racks before I then decide to bottle it. But I might stick it with just 3, racking it over, and just getting a very clear solution. So typically a Pét Nat, you wouldn't be surprised to find a little bit of cloudiness that happens when that leftover yeast that has now conditioned the bottle has dropped to the bottom. And as you move that bottle, it kind of churns up and it can make your cider cloudy. Ideally, a Pét Nat that's been really monitored will have the least amount of cloudiness in it. But we kind of let that go. If we know that's been made as a Pét Nat, it's to be expected. But if there's too much, then frankly, I call that a little bit of sloppy cider making, especially if you're at a professional level. For an amateur like me, yeah, it wouldn't be a big deal. But if you're going to be selling that bottle, you really want to strive to have that really nice clarity and minimal amount of cloudiness. That shows that the maker has really been on the ball, watching that solution the whole time and making sure that they've racked it over at that perfect time. That's why cider making takes a lot of patience. And it's not one for, couch potato. You have to be on the ball, getting up and going and checking it, no doubt. And then the bottling phase happens, and here is another key piece. You want to make sure, because you're going to have that cider finishing its fermentation in the bottle, you want to have a bottle that's going to be able to handle pressure. So something that's like a champagne bottle or structurally very sound, so that you're not creating what are called bottle bombs, and they're very, very dangerous. And if I have a sense that I am on that, straddling that line where I'm not sure if it's going to be too much high pressure and I don't have the right kind of bottle, I will put my bottled cider in a very structurally heavy-duty box and put it in an area that if it does expand too much and the glass breaks, it's not going to go flying everywhere. Thankfully, knock on wood, it hasn't happened yet. Although I do remember very well as a kid, that happened to my parents when they used to make root beer in the cellar, and you would hear bottles popping because there was just too much high pressure. But we've come a long way. My parents didn't have hydrometers or any way to really test that at that time. Now we do. And the hydrometer will tell you at that kind of ideal level for the specific gravity what you want. That's about 0.5 or 10. So it's 1.005 or 1.010 on the hydrometer. If you want to know more about specific gravity, there is an episode on that at ciderchat.com for you to kind of dig into it. Now, what I explained to you and what I explained earlier to KC was cider making basics. There's all these other things that you could do to really geek out and up your whole skill level and try different variations of it to perfect your cider or make it a certain kind of tweaked out way. All of that is fun and great. But for the average person at home making cider, or even many, many cider makers who are rural farmers and not even rural farmers, but are commercial cider makers anywhere, this is what they do. It's pretty straightforward with a couple extra bells and whistles on it, no doubt. Now let's get into this Pét Nat versus rule method and what the difference is, because I think that this is kind of cool. And I also want to throw kombucha in there too. And really, it could be also wine. So let's start with kombucha versus cider before we get to the rule method. I'll kind of keep you hanging here. Sorry about that cider reel, but I can't help myself. With kombucha versus cider, the base ingredient with kombucha is sweet tea. With cider, it's apple juice. Fresh pressed apple juice is ideal, what you want. The fermentation culture for kombucha uses what is called a SCOBY, and that is, you'll hear friends, hey, you want some SCOBY? And they'll give it to you in this like jar. It's like this white substance, and it's bacteria and yeast specific for kombucha. Cider uses yeast only. Fermentation results with kombucha being very tangy, it's low in alcohol, and it's a probiotic. So kombucha can have like a 3% alcohol in it. Cider can also be quite low too, but you're going to see at its lowest being around 4%. Maybe I have had some ciders that are 2.5%, kind of like a kombucha. But more or less, the powers that be don't consider kombucha alcoholic. Cider is. Now, the Pét Nat versus rule method, there is a difference. Both are naturally sparkling, and they're bottled before fermentation finishes. Pét Nat and rule method are the same concept. However, the rule method typically uses wild native yeast with no sulfites or filtration. Pét Nat can use either wild or cultured yeast, and sometimes it could be lightly filtered or stabilized, and that would be through the use of sulfites. The rule method, as I understand it, they use no sulfites. Both of these focus on minimal intervention and natural carbonation. The commercial challenge in making either the Pét Nat or the rule method cider is all about timing, consistency, and control for safety and quality, because you want to have a shelf-stable product that can be transported or left in a store for display and then bought by a patron. So for someone as a commercial cider maker like Little Pomona or Sam at Wilding Cider in the UK, where we first kind of publicized, I think on Cider Chat, about the rule method with Sam, and he credited a cider maker for coining this phrase, and that cidery is Skybury Cider in Wales, for coming up with that phrase, rule method. And I really want to thank Elizabeth Pimlett at the Herefordshire Museum of Cider. She had gifted me a bottle of Skybury cider while I was there in August, and it blew my mind. It was absolutely delicious. So I guess that came from that cidery, as Sam Leach of Wilding Cider had mentioned. And if you want to hear that episode with Sam, that was episode 441. Wilding Cider, it was titled Wilding Cider and the Rule Method. And Wilding is based in Somerset in the UK, not too far out of Bristol proper. Anywho, that's it in a nutshell. Rule method is, once again, no sulfites, no filtration, minimal intervention, really that fine-tuning, staying on top of the product. You have that while ferment, monitoring it, knowing when to rack it, how much to rack it. There might even be a disgorging at the end, and that's where it's already in the bottle, and there is enough sediment in the bottle, so it's almost like a traditional champagne method of cider making, where they will then try to get that yeast that's strapped to the bottom of the bottle out, so they'll open up the bottle and recap it. That could happen. It could happen. But in the rule method, I think it's pretty much straight on that they're not doing that. If I'm wrong, please correct me, because we want to get the right info out there, and certainly I do not know everything. I believe that that's the main difference there, and that's a little bit of the taste of what you're going to be seeing coming about, because I feel that, The cider I just made, it's beautiful. It's like 2 years old. It probably would have been better if I paid a little bit more attention to it earlier, got it in. It would have had a little bit more effervescence that I was serving to KC, but it came out great because I just let it do what it naturally did. Minimal intervention, no sulfites, and just let the terroir speak into those apples and show us the final product in the glass. That's the way to go, as I like to make cider making. And I know I, in Ciderville, would love to hear if you are trying your hand at making a Pét Nat or using the rule method of cider making. The funny thing about cider is that it's really simple to make, and it could also be really complex. And whatever path you choose, that is yours to own. And maybe you have found some other little twist here or some little tweak to really refine it. In the end, it's going to be the apples, the pears, what you're using for that fruit base. How good is the quality of your fruit? I think that is the main difference there. And certainly in the UK, they have a certain variety of apples and the terroir, very different from, say, somewhere like in the southwest of the U.S. or in Australia or in Latvia, all these different regions, Germany, wherever you have apples and cider makers. It's going to be a little bit different. We're going to have our own certain brand. And that's what's cool and exciting about it and why one can never get bored in the conversation. But I do hope that you got a little sense of the difference between, Pét Nat and real method, and maybe we'll be inspired to try it. Cider Chat is listener supported, and so a big tip of the glass to all the fine folks who have joined the Cider Chat Patreon page, which is a website that helps content creators like Cider Chat keep on keeping on. And a special glass to the folks who are commercial makers and businesses supporting this podcast at the Cider Going Up campaign there. We thank Ross on Wye Cider and Perry Company in the UK, Duck Chicken Cider based in London, Kanga Cider in Texas, Bent Ladder Cider and Wine in Ohio, Press Then Press, an online cider shop, the American Cider Association, Oliver Cider and Perry Company based in England, Locust Grove Cider and Brewery, based in New York State, Heman Cellar in Ontario, Canada, and Ravenwood Cider, based on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. You too can become a patron by going to the Cider Chat Patreon page. Search for Cider Chat and Patreon. That's spelled Patreon. And with that, I leave you here. This is Rhea Windcaller, signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider. We like ponds. We love orchards and having fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider. We like ponds. We like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Oh yes, we do. We like ponds. Oh yes, we do. We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. like cider.
Ba-da-da-dum.
We like palms.
Oh, yes, we do.
We like orchards, having some fun.
Yeehaw!